Hi, Nathanosaurus Rex here, and I've been GMing D&D 5th Ed for my party for a fair few months now, and I wanted to talk about something that's come up for me, and I can't be the only GM that's seeing this, so I thought it might be nice to have a little chat about it. And that is balancing encounters for low-level players and low-level parties, or low-level characters, I should say. And I found that can be more challenging than you'd initially expect. Certainly, anyone who's been DMing 5th Ed for a little while will have got an idea that the challenge ratings of creatures are not a direct thing that you can just go, yes, that I can use. You need to be a little bit more canny about it, otherwise, you're going to set up encounters that are either going to be a really dull 1 to 2 round cakewalk for your party, or an accidental, unintentional, and TPK, which can feel a little cheap as an ending and kind of, ruin your story just when it's getting going. And what's the problem then? What's kind of the difficulty here? Well, I found that the difficulty is that although a lot of lower level monsters have very few hit points, not high ACs, most adventurers of first or second level can take down a goblin or a kobold in two hits if they're not rolling particularly well. Easily take down one. You've got a strong melee fighter like our dwarf barbarian. You're probably killing 2 a round. But those less robust characters, wizards, I'm looking at you guys, you know it, they can quite easily get knocked down by even the small damage output from a couple of hits. You got a handful of goblins or a handful of kobolds, you get a handful of lucky rolls, you can very easily end up with characters on the floor quite fast, or even killed outright. I mean, look at bugbears, for example. Challenge rating 1, you've got a party of 4 first or second level adventurers, should be no problem at all. But they're doing, on a hit, 2d8 plus 2 damage, plus an extra 2d6 if they've got surprise. Even a second level barbarian with, huge constitution bonus could be on the floor in the first round of combat if things aren't going your way. So, if that's the problem, and we're just looking at raw damage there, we're not even looking at other effects like additional poison damage, causing conditions like restrained or paralyzed or blinded, petrification, any crazy stuff like that. So, it can be quite hard to arrange encounters that aren't going to arbitrarily, rapidly wipe your party out in a unsatisfactory fashion. So I got to thinking, well, what can I do about that? How can we work around that? And I think the first thing is how we think about encounters and running them. What's the purpose of them? And if the purpose is just to, get some miniatures out and run through some combat rules, then yeah, fine, you can do that. But for me, we prefer to do more of a narrative kind of role-play focused thing. And when you start thinking about encounters in that way, in terms of how they're moving the story forward, how they're giving your characters an opportunity to both role-play as well as use the mechanical features of their characters, you get quite a different sort of outlook and a different result. To explain that, I mean, the 3 key things I think of when I'm running encounters are that I should remember are: not every encounter needs to be a fight. You come across a group of bandits or some trolls, maybe the first thing you do isn't roll initiative, let's go smack on each other until one side falls over. Maybe your sneaky party of rogues and rangers might want to sneak past them and avoid them altogether with some cunning misdirection, and that's some pretty cool character stuff. You could maybe negotiate with them. Maybe there's something you could give them, something that you could persuade them about. Maybe you can, deceive them in some way with your talky characters, where your rogues and your bards and such get to shine and have their moment in the spotlight. Maybe there's other ways around it. Try and reward creativity. A good way of getting around that is don't just give experience points out for killing monsters in battle. Finding a really cunning way of sneaking around them and otherwise dealing with what could have been a combat encounter in an interesting and different way should also reward people with experience, and that will get your players thinking more creatively about how can they deal with this situation rather than how can we knock HP off the stat blocks of these monsters. So that's the first thing. And if not every encounter needs to be a fight, well, when it is a fight, not every fight needs to be to the death. You know, a lot of the creatures that you're going to face may be mindless, savage beasts, maybe zombies that have no kind of sense of their own self-preservation, or bestial, strange bug creatures from the Underdark. You know, that's going to happen, but a lot of creatures that you're going to come up against are intelligent. You know, they have motivations other than just like slugging it out with some adventurers until one of them dies. You know, goblins, for example, are a great low-level and classic low-level enemy. They're intelligent, they're cunning, they're a little bit ruthless, and they're also massive cowards. So if I'm running an encounter with a bunch of goblins, and a goblin gets knocked in one hit down to 1 hit point left, is it going to stay there fighting that massive hulking Goliath fighter? Probably not. It's probably going to book out of there and run away. If in the first 2 turns of combat, your heroes have decimated half of a 20-strong goblin camp, maybe the rest of them are going to surrender or flee. Same with other people. Maybe your bandits 3-4 rounds in, when they see that they're not going to get the upper hand, that they're not massively outclassing their enemy, maybe they're going to turn tail and run. Maybe they're going to throw the weapons down. Maybe they're going to say, whoa, actually, you guys take our loot. Maybe they're going to ask to join up with them. There's lots of other ways of dealing with that. And that also involves the objective that you have for an encounter. If it's just a case of there are some monsters in this room, kill them all and steal their stuff, I mean, that's very simple. That's that will be a knockdown, drag out fight, and that's going to happen from time to time. But I find my players enjoy and remember an encounter that was interesting way more than they do one that was just difficult. And you can do that in a number of ways. You can give them an objective other than just killing the bad guys. Maybe there's a lot of minions and one big guy. Maybe the bandit chief has a bounty on his head, but nobody cares about the little guys. Maybe he's the target you've got to take out. Maybe taking out the leader of a bunch of orcs will leave them unable to continue or unwilling to continue fighting. Perhaps your goal is to steal something from the trolls that would otherwise completely wipe your party out. Maybe you've just got to delay them long enough for the rogue to get to the back and steal that cursed idol, or stop the ritual from going ahead by breaking the altar. Maybe you've got to get in there and rescue some captives who, while a distraction of a combat's happening, and as soon as you've got them out the back door, everybody can flee. So think about kind of the purpose and the objective of your encounter and how your bad guys are going to react to what the players are doing. Also, to keep your encounters interesting, and I might talk about this another time in more depth, but keeping your encounters interesting and adding sort of levelers that can change the difficulty of play. I mean, you stick a challenge rating whatever creature in with a party in an open, flat, featureless arena, and really it's kind of stat block against stat block and the luck of the dice. However, you can kind of level the battlefield by allowing your party to use the environment by including things like elevated or covered positions they can hide and fire from behind, or run round to hide and gain concealment and advantage on their attacks. Or perhaps there are other terrain features they can use, like moving, holding a doorway that prevents lots of enemies clustering on them all at once. Or maybe there's piles of rocks or explosive barrels that can come into play that can give them an advantage. Maybe something even as simple as jumping up on the table in the middle of the tavern to give themselves a height advantage in that brawl. And these are all ways that the party can gain a little bit, just a small advantage that's going to tip the tables a little more in their favour to help them out on those more difficult encounters. And if you find that your players, your party, aren't kind of picking up on those, even when you're describing those kind of things in the environment, if they're not sort of having the proactive sort of approach of asking, is there something, a statue I could push over, or is there something else? Maybe nothing is going to inspire them to start doing stuff like that as quickly as having a couple of your bad guys occasionally do something similar. That's going to get them thinking, well, how can I turn that back around on them? There's a roleplay game, Feng Shui, Hong Kong action movie, time-traveling, crazy action stuff, which I love. The GM section in that book is amazing. It has some great advice on playing theatre of the mind, and also kind of using sort of the environment and coming up with cool, funky stunts, as that's its whole deal. But there's a lot of stuff in there that you can translate into any game, really. But so you can bring that kind of thing in, the terrain, the other features. You can also give them a helping hand, have an NPC that comes in and sort of turns the tables a little bit for them if they're struggling, or to come in with them if there's a role in the party that's not filled that you think might help them out. But that's something you don't really want to overuse, as it can take the spotlight away from your players a little bit, which isn't really what we want to do. But occasionally that can introduce an interesting NPC to the story, and also give them a little bit of a power boost when necessary. Also, another good thing which will add to your story and help your players to balance out an encounter that might otherwise be too challenging for them is foreshadowing. So if you've got kind of an opportunity for them to maybe see that the thing that they've heard is stalking the village in the distance, kind of uprooting trees, and they then go to where it's rumoured to have been, and they find that not just the door but the front wall of the farmhouse that's been raided has been smashed in by some large creature. Then they follow the tracks and they can see that it's got large talons and it's scrape, and you're both building story and building anticipation and a little bit of a sense of, this is, have we bitten off more than we can chew here? So you're both building that and giving them the opportunity to get little clues on what that creature might do, what kind of tactics might be useful against it, and what kind of, you can even give clues as to things like what sort of resistances it might have, or what kind of attacks it might do, or other tricks it might have up its sleeve, with little crumbs of information. If you think about shows like Supernatural, or the Witcher games and series, things where that kind of tends to happen. You're looking for a creature and you're learning more about it, and you're learning enough that you can maybe find a way of being able to defeat it without it just eviscerating you on the spot. That's maybe some good inspiration for that. And coming back to how we approach things as well, sometimes your players are going to get unlucky. Sometimes stuff's not going to go their way. Sometimes bad dice rolls or bad life choices, because you can say to some parties, "You really sure you want to do that?" 8 times, and they'll be like, "Absolutely, we're going to set fire to the tavern that we've boarded ourselves into, because we know these bad guys, they're vulnerable to fire." And you just got to roll with the punches there. Sometimes stuff's going to go badly wrong. But not every defeat of the party or defeat of a character necessarily has to be a death. You have to be careful, again, with this, because what you don't want to do is extract all sense of risk and danger. If your players feel like, whatever their characters do, no matter how deep they get, no matter how stupid their decisions are, you're going to pull a Deus Ex Machina and just pull their asses out of the fire and go, yeah, you guys wake up and it was all a dream, then that really sort of cheapens things. That's not satisfying for anybody. So, you've kind of got to be careful about having them randomly saved by somebody all the time, although that can be a cool way to introduce a benefactor NPC, for example. But other things can happen. Say the party's defeated by that, lucky band of 6 goblins that you just can't seem to stop rolling crits for. Maybe they don't kill them, cook them, and eat them. Maybe they, tie them up, staunch their wounds, and your party wake up with none of their gear, in cages, about to be, used for slave labour. And then your next session's just written itself. Your next session's going to consist of trying to break out, escape, regain their, both their equipment, treasure, and pride, and maybe take the goblins when they least expect it, in the dead of night, when they've broken out from where they're supposedly safely in captivity. Perhaps their aggressors leave them for dead. Perhaps they cast them into a prison. Perhaps they cast them into another realm. They wake up in the Feywild, abandoned to the strange beasts that live there. There's all kinds of other consequences that you can have for losing a fight, other than just the "you are dead" in big red letters on the screen. So, all things to think about. Also, considering the monsters that you use and what their motivations might be if the party lose. Also, looking at some of their abilities and so on. For example, I did individual sessions with each of the characters in my campaign to take them from level 1 to level 2 before the party all ended up meeting and going on their epic quest together. And that made me kind of think, well, what can I do with that? And well, here's a couple of examples. I have a rogue with very low hit points. She's at level 3 and only has 13, which means that most things kind of up to the range of a mid-level gust of wind could feasibly just kill her stone dead, which would be a little bit dull. So she's taking risks, she's doing interesting things, she's in danger, but for this first episode I didn't really want to kill the character before we even get going. So what do I do about it? Well, she's playing a rogue, a thief, a heist artist, so I ran her through a heist. Wasn't even any combat in it. Didn't need to be. Good heist. If you're getting in a fight with the guards, you done it wrong. So you can run sort of non-combat involved stuff and still have an interesting, challenging scenario and session. For another character playing a ranger, I put him up against a couple of giant wolf spiders in the forest. Why giant wolf spiders? Well, they're at kind of a power rating where it's possible that he could defeat them. However, if he doesn't, if you look at the way they work, on a hit they do damage. There's then a constitution save to avoid taking poison damage. If the poison damage reduces you to 0 hit points, you don't die, you are stable, but paralysed and unconscious. So because of this, I knew that should he lose the fight with them, well, he's poisoned, he's unconscious, they're going to wrap him up in silk, drag him into their burrow, and I can have him wake up later and effect his escape with the character that he'd been looking for in the forest when he was set upon by these horrific beasties. So there are ways that you can work around that, and again, as a DM, you never want to make your players feel like there's no sense of threat, like they're never going to get the characters killed. That should absolutely be a possibility, but these are some ways that I've thought of for not lowering the challenge rating, but letting your party and your players rise up to it in an interesting and creative way that lets them have a better chance of overcoming some of those challenges that could otherwise potentially be a big problem for them, and could also bring your story to a sudden, like an underwhelming conclusion, which is the last thing that we want. Anyway, I've been Nathanosaurus Rex, and I'm going to talk to you about some more stuff again soon.